Welcome back to the Renaissance Humanism podcast. In today's episode, I will be discussing the Foundation series written by Isaac Asimov, one of the Golden Age writers from the Golden Age of science fiction. This episode will also include some information on the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, why civilizations collapse, and why I think this book was a excellent read for anybody who's actually interested in these kinds of topics. It's not so much a storybook or a novel, it's an anthology. It's the aim of the series to map the decline and fall of empires. That's why it brings a lot of themes such as culture, technology, why societies fail. Also, the writer himself takes a lot of inspiration from the historian Edward Gibbon, who published The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire in 1776, which also happens to be the same year that Adam Smith published The Wealth of Nations as well. They're both pretty good books, The Wealth of Nations and The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. They're both fantastic books. And for this episode, it's very much talking about the Foundation trilogy and what you, the listener or the viewer, can actually get from reading this book. Is very much thought provoking and it makes you think about the world. The content itself is good, it's a good quality. The only downside is that its characters come across at certain points a bit flat, just because Isaac Asimov is more focused upon the actual story and the thought that goes into the story, not necessarily the characters. The characters are just a vehicle for him to discuss serious topics, which is often great fiction as well. For example, George Lucas, when he created the Star Wars movies back in the 1970s, he took a lot of inspiration from Christianity about redemption, and that very much influenced that Star Wars trilogy because a lot of fiction writers they use the real world ideologies and place them in a science fiction setting in order to give more depth and breadth and character to the stories that's trying to develop. Okay, okay. For today's podcast, then, this book is very relevant and for people who enjoy politics, geopolitics, culture, and will find it inspirational for its relevance to what's happening today in modern culture in the United States, how modern societies decline, and also how nation develops as well. This book focuses on the decline and fall of empires. In the trilogy, this is the rise and fall of the Galactic Empire, and how that the Galactic Empire will originally be replaced by a new empire. Uh, these topics also include the decay within our own civilization. Also, there are some contrasts about why civilizations choose to fail and could be something very similar to what's happening now in the United States, in other Western nations, and particularly in the Anglo speaking sphere. Foundation novel is a novel by Isaac Asimov, first published in 1951. It was the first volume of his famous Foundation trilogy, published between 1951 and 1953, describing the collapse and rebirth of a vast interstellar empire in a future universe. The original book trilogy takes heavily inspiration from the 18th century historian, essayist, a member of the British Parliament, Edward Gibbon, author of The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, published in 1776. In turn, Isaac Asimov Foundation trilogy uh, also inspired the creation of the Dune trilogy by Frank Herbert, Star Wars created by George Lucas, which set the framework what we now consider contemporary science fiction. Isaac Asimov was also part of the golden age of science fiction from the mid 1930s to early 1960s. It was what's so fascinating about the trilogy is how it depicts the decay of the Galactic Empire in contrast to a rising new galactic empire in the form of the Foundation on the planet Terminus. This is the modern day and ancient themes such as why societies choose and fail, again, linking it today and linking it to the past. Isaac Asimov's series Foundation all shows that nations and empires decline because of the citizenry stop believing in the empire due to long-term systemic decisions happening over centuries. And that's what leads to the fall of nations. We can also see contemporary examples happening with China, Germany, and the British, all failing in their efforts to produce replacement populations because its citizenry no longer have faith that there's an actual better future for for that nation, even though globally China, England, France, we've never had it better. But due to social media, people are thinking that we're now living in the end times, which is completely it's nonsense. But that's belief for you. All civilization, nation states, and their institutions eventually collapse or are permanently destroyed, reformed again in different iterations. But by their successor states are dynasties, especially in places such as China, which has a long and bloody history of at least over 4,000 years long. Some people put it down to 2,000, others 3,500. That varies depending on what history you're reading and who you're listening to. For the Roman Empire itself, it fall began long before the Germanic tribes crippled the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century, and its final collapse in 476 AD. The event that destroyed the Roman Empire happened after its victory against Carthage in the Third Carthage War, or the Punic War, called the Third Carthaginian War, in 149 to 146 BCE. That's before the Common Era, or before Christ. Uh, the third of these wars was naturally, between the Republic of Rome and the Carthaginians, which resulted in the destruction of the Carthaginian Empire and Roman hegemony within the Western Mediterranean. However, what destroyed the Roman Empire was internal political decay, and the inability of its leadership to resolve problems peacefully and democratically. Again, for people in the United States, for people living in other Western nations, you can see a theme that's happening now, that the political leadership is unwilling or unable to actually have a peaceful and successful dialogue, and also that for the losers, people that lose elections like Donald Trump, they have an inability to admit defeat, which is one of the it's how we have a safe and successful democracy. Because when the losers lose, they accept that defeat and come again in no election. For the Romans, this happened with the murder of Tiberius Crassus in 133 BCE. He was murdered by the Roman Senate with chairs. The reason he was killed was due to intending to reform the economic system within the Roman Empire, with more and more concentration in the Roman senatorial classes, due to the reason for this because the Roman senators they were buying more and more land, becoming more and more wealthy, and it was destroying the Roman middle classes, destroying independent farmers, and because of this, Tiberius Gracchus tried to enact reforms, but because of trying to do these reforms and hurting the senatorial pockets, he was murdered by the Roman Senate with chairs. Again, this Foundation trilogy focuses upon why these nations failed, and there's many parallels that can be made between our contemporary lives, our contemporary civilization, and what's in this book as well, because it maps the fall of a civilization, and that's why I think you'll find this to be a good read, informative, and very thought provoking as well. That's the key takeaway from the Foundation series by Isaac Asimov.